Hey guys, tonight we journey into the hot, slow breath of ancient Egypt to a time before alarms, before concrete, and definitely before unions. You're here to help build one of the Great Pyramids, which means the air is full of dust, the sandals are laughably thin, and your boss believes water breaks are optional. You're not special. You're not a master mason or a sacred engineer. You're just you, with sore feet, sunburnt shoulders, and 1,000 other half-awake workers trudging beside you. You stand there, blinking into the haze, trying to decide if this is a dream or a low-budget historical reenactment you forgot signing up for. The Nile's morning fog hasn't even cleared, and already the shouting starts. Foremen, engineers, water carriers, everyone has a job, including you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're watching from somewhere far or weird or wonderfully boring, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step barefoot onto packed sand. The sunrise throws gold across the limestone face of the half-finished pyramid. The structure is terrifyingly large, like someone tried to stack a mountain into a triangle, got halfway, then said, "You know what? Let's just keep going." The workers barely glance up. Some haul ropes, others wipe sweat, and a few seem to be arguing over whose shift it is to grease the sled runners. You're handed a basket of copper tools, blunt, chipped, but weirdly shiny. Welcome to your new life. Here's the first thing that messes with your brain. This thing isn't being built by slaves. You always pictured people in chains being whipped up sandstone ramps. But most of the workers around you are freckled farmers, craftspeople, and part-time masons from Nile villages. They're here for food, respect, and the state-organized equivalent of a decent benefits package, mostly in bread and beer. You join a team dragging a sled across wooden tracks. On the sled, a block the size of your studio apartment. It's not a special VIP stone, just one of 2-3 million. You pull with everything you've got, and the stone moves approximately one adult toenail's width. There are no pulleys, no iron levers, no aliens hovering above to whisper "lift with your back," just raw muscle, sand-waxed sleds, and men shouting timing chants that sound like angry lullabies. Someone dumps water onto the sand in front of you. It reduces friction. That one trick might have saved Egypt from collectively dislocating every shoulder in the kingdom. Historians still argue whether ramps spiraled, zigzagged, or extended in straight, brutal lines. You don't care. You just know your thighs are on fire and you'd trade your future soul for a decent foot massage. You pass a guy named Tepi, who's been stacking limestone for 3 months straight. He says he once saw a foreman drop his reed pen and quit. Walked into the Nile. Tepi shrugs. Probably works as a fisherman now. The noise, somehow, never stops. Chisels tap. Foremen bark. Flutes play somewhere, probably an attempt to keep morale above zero. The desert heat doesn't care. It soaks into your skull, sits behind your eyes, like a baked stone, and simmers your thoughts down to one word. Why? You take a break in the shade of a half-placed block, watching others move like tired ants. A young boy runs past, barefoot and yelling, carrying someone's lunch. Onions, bread, a tiny ceramic jug of date syrup. The scent of garlic clings to everything, including you. Quirky fact of the day. They used crocodile dung as sunscreen, or medicine, or both. Nobody's quite sure. The texts are unclear, and frankly, nobody wants to test it. You rub your arm and find the limestone has coated your skin in powder. You've become part of the pyramid already, and you haven't even hauled your second rock. As you settle into the rhythm of work, pull, grunt, drag, swear you realize something unsettling. It's kind of peaceful. No phones, no meetings, just sweat, rhythm, and a weird sense of teamwork that transcends language. You don't know how to say "watch your fingers" in ancient Egyptian, but you scream it anyway, and the guy next to you seems to get the gist. Occasionally, Priests in white linen robes walk past, muttering blessings, or performing tiny rituals with palm fronds and incense. You're told they're measuring divine alignment. You wonder if the gods might bless your lower back instead. Around noon, the horn sounds. Lunch. You shuffle to the shade of a mud brick hut and collapse next to some other workers. One offers you a chunk of barley bread dense enough to qualify as a blunt weapon, and a cup of lukewarm beer that tastes like wet wood. It's oddly comforting. Nobody talks much. They just breathe, stare, and sip. You listen to the wind and think about how many centuries it would take for the desert to bury this thing if we all just stopped. Spoiler, it never gets buried. That's sort of the point. By late afternoon, you're back at it. The sun tilts westward. The stones don't get lighter, but your body starts to learn the trick of the movements, the rhythm of pulling just before the shout, the timing of your steps so you don't twist your ankle again. And still, it rises, higher, wider, sharper. One stone, one rope, one calloused hand at a time. By the second day, maybe third. Who's counting anymore? You've accepted a few strange truths. 1. You're never getting all this sand out of your ears. 2. Your forearms now twitch on their own, like little snakes curling in protest. And 3. The stones aren't magical. They're just rocks. Big ones. Yes, heavy enough to compress your spine into an accordion, but not enchanted, not weightless, and definitely not levitated by chanting priests or anti-gravity secrets gifted by lizard gods. They're limestone. Mostly, some granite for the flashier parts, all of it quarried with tools that would make a modern stonemason cry into their Home Depot apron. You squint across the horizon toward the quarry. It's not far, just over a mile from most of the pyramid's core stones. Granite, however, comes from Aswan, which is 200 miles south. Those blocks take riverboats, ramps, sleds, prayers, and sheer stubbornness. But for now, you're headed to the local pit. When you get there, the noise hits first. It's less coordinated than the pyramid site, more chaotic. Clanging, like an orchestra made entirely of frustrated goats. Workers swing copper chisels, pound wedges, shout at the rock, and occasionally just sit down in defeat. You feel that in your soul. The limestone splits with patience. They hammer wooden pegs into cracks, pour water to expand them, and then let the heat do the rest. It's not fast. It's not elegant, but it works. Somehow, the rocks surrender, one slow fracture at a time. You try your hand at chiseling. The copper blade thunks against the surface like a dull spoon hitting a frozen steak. Your hands vibrate. Your teeth vibrate. You wonder if your brain might rattle loose like a wooden toy. A tool master named Sayanedge pats your shoulder and shows you the trick. Hit where the rock's already given up. Look for the micro cracks, the weakness. Don't fight the stone, negotiate with it. You raise your chisel again, this time more like a whisper than a shout. A sliver chips away. You grin. Then you drop the chisel and stub your toe on a jagged corner. The rock does not grin back. Here's something weird. Copper tools are too soft for this. Everyone knows it. Yet here they are, reshaped daily by on-site blacksmiths who melt, reform, and resharpen thousands of tips. Copper melts at a mere 980 degrees Fahrenheit. A number that makes you sweat just thinking about it. The forges burn bright, fed by desert wind and animal dung. And the air smells like toasted pennies. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians used bronze or arsenic-hardened copper for extra durability. Some say yes. Some say, please stop emailing me about alien drills. You don't get an answer. Just more dust in your mouth and a very tired elbow. On your break, you lean against a boulder and sip tepid water from a palm-wrapped jug. Sayanedge tells you that on bad days, they believe the stones grow heavier out of spite. You believe it too. One worker even swears a boulder moved overnight, probably just shifted due to temperature, but still spooky. You ask about accidents. He nods grimly. Broken feet. Crushed fingers. Once, a goat wandered into a wedge line and got launched like a hairy catapult. No one's seen it since a god now. Maybe. And yet, for all the sweat and risk, It's kind of satisfying. Watching the blocks emerge, seeing the cuts run straight and clean, feeling the weight of your work even if it's slowly flattening your spine. Nearby, a teenager sharpens chisels on a slab of sandstone, humming a song about donkeys and dreams. A little girl runs by, balancing flatbread on her head like it's the most normal thing in the world. A dog naps in the shade. Clearly smarter than all of you, you wander over to the transport line. Blocks are loaded onto wooden sleds and dragged across the sand with ropes thicker than your wrist. Workers shout, chant, and brace. The sled groans like an old man sitting down, and then it moves. Just a little. They pour water in front of the sled. Again, you're starting to think the water isn't just for lubrication. It's for dramatic effect. Everything feels theatrical here, like the entire operation is part ritual, part punishment, part giant group project with no snacks. And still, the pyramid rises. You return to the construction site and watch as a freshly cut block is slotted into place with terrifying precision. Two guys with measuring rods grunt in agreement. A priest waves incense. A foreman checks the angle using nothing more than a plumb line and a terrifyingly judgmental expression. You try to imagine doing this a million times. Literally, each block carved, hauled, leveled, and placed. It makes your bones hurt. You think back to the textbooks that suggested slaves dragged stones in chains while being whipped. And yet here you are, among dusty but free men, farmers, craftsmen, even some women helping with food and linens. Most are fed, respected, and in relatively good spirits except for one guy whose sandal snapped mid-haul. He's currently cursing the gods of leather. You spot a cart carrying tools back to the forge, bent chisels, splintered sled wood, frayed rope. All of it will be repaired, recycled, reused. Nothing here is wasted. Not effort, not sweat, not even dung. You glance up at the unfinished face of the pyramid. Workers cling to wooden scaffolding like sunburnt ants. A foreman barks at you to move your block faster. You smile weakly and lift, stone by stone, slice by slice. The great myth of magic fades with every callus. The truth is heavier but far more interesting. The sun's not even high yet, and your knees already feel like they've aged 2 dynasties. You're not lifting stone today, you're on ramp duty. And if you thought hauling a sled across level ground was fun, wait until you do it uphill. You trudge toward the base of the ramp, which looks less like a ramp and more like a sand-covered nightmare designed by someone who's never known joy. It zigzags up the side of the pyramid, steep, packed with gravel and clay, and reinforced with wooden beams that creak every time a block goes by. It's wide enough for 2 sleds, but barely. Passing someone means hugging the edge and hoping today's not the day you become a historical footnote. The ramp is everything here. Without it, there's no way to get the stones up the pyramid. That's the secret, not alien technology. Not anti-gravity stones, just wood, sweat, and the quiet despair of dragging limestone on a steep incline. Historians still argue about the design. Was it a straight ramp from the front, a spiral wrapping around the entire structure like some angry pasta noodle, or a switchback setup with multiple levels? You walk on what seems to be the switchback kind. It feels right, but honestly, you're too tired to care. Your job today is to help guide the sled as it moves. Not push, not pull, guide. Which sounds easy until you realize that a tiny wobble could send the stone and everyone near it off the side. There are no guardrails, just gravity, bad luck, and your very average sense of balance. A team of 30 workers chants in rhythm, pulling ropes in sync. The sled creeps forward. You shout to one guy who's about to step too close to the edge. He glares at you, then grunts a thanks. About halfway up, the sled groans and stops. Everyone collapses like a string's been cut. Someone's rope has frayed, and you all just stare at it like it personally betrayed you. A rope runner sprints down the ramp to grab a replacement from the gear pit. He's barefoot. You want to cry? In the meantime, a foreman yells about grease. A boy appears with a clay pot and slathers fat along the wood track. The sled team stretches, groans, and drinks from little leather pouches that smell like fermented figs. You do the same. It's better than nothing, which, in Egypt, is usually your other option. You ask how many blocks they move a day. One of the workers shrugs. 100, maybe Depends who yells louder, the foreman or the gods. Here's a quirky detail you didn't expect. Ancient Egyptians sometimes added wooden rollers underneath the sleds on steeper parts. Not full logs, just short ones, swapped out constantly. They weren't super effective, but anything that helped avoid crushed toes was worth a try. Of course, there's always one guy who forgets to move the rear roller, and that's when things get dramatic. The replacement rope arrives, and the pull begins again. The chant returns. Low, guttural, repetitive. You find yourself matching their pace without thinking. Left, pull. Right, pull. Breathe. Swear. By the time the block reaches the top level, you're covered in sweat, dust, and what might be crocodile dung sunscreen. You don't even remember who applied it. At the platform, a separate crew takes over. They shim the block with tiny stones, then use wooden levers, simple, clunky, but effective to nudge it into perfect alignment. You're not allowed to help here. This crew is elite. They wear slightly cleaner kilts and yell at each other with technical words like, no, the other left. You sit at the edge of the ramp and stare down at the desert. The Nile glimmers in the distance. You can just barely see the workers' village, smoke rising from morning fires. It looks peaceful from here, almost like a painting. Except for the guy throwing up next to the barley grinder. The ramp vibrates behind you. Another sled starts its journey. And then another. You wonder how long it'll be before the ramp collapses. Turns out, they rebuild it constantly, widening it, rerouting it, extending it like a never-ending construction project from which there is no escape. As you descend, back down carefully, because one wrong step turns you into a limestone pancake. You pass two men hauling rope coils and muttering about how the north ramp's cursed again. You don't ask. Back on ground level, you meet a carpenter sharpening a sled runner with a flint scraper. He offers you a seat. You gladly accept. He explains how the sleds wear down quickly. Too much drag. He mutters, too little beer. He lets you try greasing one of the runners. The mixture is some horrifying blend of animal fat and something that smells suspiciously like onions. You smear it on like sunscreen. He laughs. Not for your face, friend. You check your hands. You will never be clean again. By sunset, your legs are jelly. Your shoulders are gravel. Your brain is somewhere near the water jars, asking to be reborn as a bird. You watch the pyramid glowy orange, the shadows stretching like silent spectators. Somehow, it grew taller today. Just a little. You lay down on a bundle of spare rope. Close your eyes. And think about ramps, endless ramps, ramps in your dreams, ramps that lead to other ramps. The pyramid keeps rising. So do you. Your back still aches from ramp duty, but today brings a new surprise. You're assigned to the workers' village, which, in your sand-filled, sleep-deprived state, sounds like code for nap time. It's not. You cross the sun-cracked ground, following a narrow path past palm-woven fences, low mud brick buildings, and smells that can only be described as fermented grain meets roasted something. Children chase each other barefoot. Dogs bark with no real purpose. Smoke drifts lazily from cooking fires. This isn't just a camp, it's a city in miniature. It's called Hayt el Ghurab, though no one actually says that. Everyone calls it the place with the beer, or just home. You've seen this village from the ramp, tiny, dusty, unimportant. Now that you're in it, you realize it's the engine behind the pyramid. The work may happen up on the plateau, but life happens here. Your first stop, the bakery. And this isn't your average wheat and hope kind of place. It's a full-on industrial bakery, turning out thousands of loaves daily. Rows of dome-shaped ovens crackle with heat. Women shape loaves by hand, pressing dough into ceramic molds dusted with sand because non-stick spray hasn't been invented yet. You're handed a loaf. It's still warm. You bite into it and instantly understand why ancient Egyptian teeth were so bad. It's chewy, full of grit, and has the crunch of tiny rocks. That's not metaphorical. Actual sand gets into everything, on purpose. Sometimes, toothpaste, optional. Then there's the beer hut. Not a pub exactly, just big clay vats bubbling with fermenting barley. It's thick, murky, and somehow both sour and sweet. You're told not to gulp it. You gulp it. You regret this instantly. It tastes like someone left oatmeal in the sun for a week, then whispered alcohol over it. Still, this brew keeps the workers going. It's packed with calories, slightly antiseptic, and occasionally strong enough to make you forget you're hauling stones for someone else's afterlife. You pass a row of tiny houses. Some are just one room, with straw mats, simple pottery, and walls covered in faded red handprints. Probably kids marking territory like ancient little landlords. Others are larger, shared by entire work gangs. You spot dice games played with animal knuckles, flutes carved from reeds, and a man asleep with the cat draped over his head like a very judgmental hat. Quirky fact: ancient Egyptian workers weren't just fed, they had medical care. Legit medical care. In one hut, a healer wraps a sprained ankle with linen strips soaked in honey and what smells like garlic and regret. He mutters something about foot demons and then pats the patient's head like he's been cured. You nod. Science. Nearby, a young girl helps her grandmother sort dried onions into baskets. You learn onions are currency here, not just food. They're medicine, antiseptic, and payment. One worker once refused his rations until the onion count was correct. Honestly, fair. You follow a food runner named Mena, whose job is basically Uber Eats for pyramid crews. She balances a clay tray on her head with terrifying grace, trotting past goats, shouting children, and flustered foremen. Her tray holds bread, beer, onions, dried fish, and date cakes, a full menu powered by carbs and desperation. As you trail her, you get a sense of how complex this system is. The workers on the plateau don't just get tossed food like zoo animals. Everything is scheduled, measured, documented. Scribes track intake. Healers report injuries. Supply runners make sure every haul team gets their daily fix of gritty bread and fermented sludge. Historians still argue whether these laborers were full-time professionals or seasonal workers rotating in from the countryside. Some say teams worked for months, then went home to farm. Others argue many were permanent staff, paid and trained for a lifetime of labor. Either way, you're impressed, and also slightly tipsy from barley beer burps. You sneak into the kitchen hut less Gordon Ramsay. More organized chaos. There's a woman slicing dates with a knife that looks older than time. A boy stirs a pot of lentils. Someone accidentally lights their sleeve on fire. No one screams. They just slap it out with practiced efficiency. Happens hourly. You help grind grain using a saddle quern, a flat stone, and a handheld roller. After 10 minutes, your shoulders are howling, and your palms feel like sandpaper dipped in regret. The woman next to you laughs and hands you a palm full of something that tastes like fig and ash. You pretend to enjoy it. She doesn't believe you. You end your shift at the laundry pit, where workers scrub linen kilts with lye and sand. A young man tells you they use natron too, the same mineral used in mummification. You slowly back away. As the sky turns gold, music rises, flutes, drums, and the occasional off-key chant about donkeys and divine punishment. Workers gather around the fire, passing loaves and stories. Someone carves a little bird into the wall with a flint chip. No one stops him. Maybe that bird will outlast us all. You lay down beside a wall warmed by the sun. A dog curls up near your feet. The village is alive with laughter, firelight, and the rhythmic hum of humans doing what humans do best: working, eating, singing, surviving. The pyramid may be where the pharaoh rests forever, but this village, this is where the real life hums. You wake to the scent of onions and wet copper. Not a romantic perfume, but one that means only one thing. Today, you're heading to the mines. The sun hasn't even cracked the horizon when you're marched toward a caravan of donkeys, baskets, and men already sweating through their linen wraps. The journey to the copper mines in Sinai takes days by boat, but you're joining a smaller team headed to a nearby extraction site, a rocky outcrop where the desert punches upward in jagged, sun-bleached fangs. Your guide, an older man named Cow, grins as he hands you a pickaxe that looks like it's seen some things. Don't argue with the rock, he says, just annoy it until it gives up. Comforting. The path to the mine is narrow, lined with strange, swirling stones that glint like wet beetle shells in the early light. The desert breathes hot even in the morning. Your water skin sloshes against your hip with an almost accusatory weight. You're already thirsty. Once you reach the site, it hits you. This place is quiet in a different way, not the peaceful hum of the workers' village. No, this is hollow silence, the kind where sound gets swallowed. You can taste minerals in the air, metallic and sour. The mining pit is a yawning wound carved into the earth walls, blackened by fire. Stairways chiseled crudely into the rock. You step inside and everything cools by 10 degrees. It's a relief until you realize the chill comes with a thick, throat-coating dust. You cough. Hekau just shrugs. Better than camel dung smoke. They mine copper here, the lifeblood of tools, not bronze too fancy, just soft, stubborn, annoyingly pure copper that hides inside stone like it's being paid to avoid you. Your job: bash, burn, scoop. You start by helping a fire setter. He piles brushwood against the rock face and lights it. The flames crawl up the wall like lazy spiders. After an hour or two, the rock heats up. Then comes the trick. Cold water gets splashed on the superheated surface. Crack! The rock splits with a sharp snap, sending flakes flying like angry insects. You jump. Hekau doesn't. That's the rock talking, he says. It doesn't like change. Quirky fact. These miners believed in stone spirits. Some left offerings bread, beads, even a hair braid tucked into a crevice. You pass one little alcove holding what looks like dried dates and a carved frog. You resist the urge to ask questions. You take a turn with the pickaxe. The copper ore glints in small, stubborn veins just beneath the surface. Each strike sends up sparks of dust. Your arms throb. Your neck aches. You begin fantasizing about being reincarnated as a spoon. By midday, the sun turns the mine's entrance into a glowing eye. You sit in the shade of a boulder, chewing dry lentils and swatting flies. The miners chat casually about yesterday's haul, one guy's foot fungus, and whether or not a snake cursed the tunnel 3 weeks ago. You nod like you understand all of this. Historians still argue whether copper mining was a punishment job or a prestigious one. On one hand, it's dangerous, hot, and exhausting. On the other, copper was essential. Your chisel literally doesn't exist without it. Some theories even suggest mining crews had their own priests. Honestly, after watching one guy pour milk onto a rock while chanting to Lady of the Mountains, you're inclined to believe it. Afternoon brings more digging. You help fill baskets with ore. Each one weighs more than your will to live. Then comes the climb, hauling these baskets up steep ramps with nothing but a rope looped over your back. You try not to look down. You fail. Your legs become jelly. You make it anyway. At the top, you meet the smelting crew. They work in wind-sheltered pits, using foot bellows to blast heat into clay furnaces. It's like standing in a bakery that hates you. Inside the furnaces, crushed ore and charcoal melt together, forming little copper blooms. The air stings your eyes. Your nose fills with the smoke and metallic fog. A boy hands you a metal ingot no bigger than your palm. It's still warm, still smells like lightning. You stare at it, stunned that all that effort produced something so small. And yet, this is it. This nugget will become a chisel, which will shape a block, which will sit in a wall for 4,000 years. You kind of hate it. You also kind of love it. As the sun drops behind the ridge, the miners gather around a fire. No songs here, just quiet chewing and the occasional joke about who smells the worst. You sit beside Hekau. He hands you a pouch of sour figs and says, "Now you know why the pyramid doesn't just appear." You nod. Yeah, now you know. You've returned from the mines thinking, well, at least now I'll get a break. Ha! No such thing. You're barely back in the workers' village when someone hands you a wooden mallet, a string, and what looks like a warped ruler. Tool day. They say. You nod like you know what that means. Turns out, you're with the tool makers now, those quiet, patient magicians who managed to pull off the impossible, crafting instruments of precise geometry, using materials that would barely qualify as kindergarten art supplies today. You follow a man named Beck. He's missing 2 teeth, wears a linen wrap speckled with sawdust, and absolutely refuses to speak unless you hand him the right tool before he reaches for it. You get it wrong twice. The third time, he just glares until your soul tries to leave your body. First lesson: sleds don't build themselves. Beck shows you how to build a proper stone hauling sled from acacia wood. Each sled must be strong, lightweight, and replaceable. The runners are wide and curved upward at the front. They're coated with animal fat or, occasionally, something mysteriously referred to as ox butter, which smells like despair and garlic. Beck sands the wood with crushed quartz. You try it and immediately get a splinter. He chuckles. You are the joke. Next up, copper chisels, broken constantly, reshaped daily. There's a whole forge dedicated to this, where smiths reheat the copper tips and hammer them into shape. You watch as one smith melts ingots into tiny molds made from fired clay. He then cools them in water and grinds them down with sandstone blocks until they're sharp enough to cut limestone, but just barely. You ask why they don't use iron. He laughs so hard he drops his hammer. Iron is for the gods, he says, or the people who haven't been born yet. Fair. Then come the measuring tools, and this is where your jaw drops. A piece of string and a plumb bob. That's your level. A merket, or star clock, is used for night alignment. It's just 2 sticks and some thread, but they use it to track the stars and lay out perfectly straight lines. How? Nobody knows. Probably divine spite. Beck shows you how they align the pyramid's base using nothing but stakes, string, and a leveling tool called an A-frame. It's literally a wooden triangle with a string hanging down the middle. You'd laugh, but then you see how precise the line is, and how every block on the entire south face depends on it. Historians still argue how the Egyptians kept their angles so perfect with such primitive gear. Some say they used water trenches for leveling. Others believe long sight lines and solar tracking did the job. You're watching Beck eyeball a slope, drop his plumb line, and mutter something about one handbreadths off. Either way, your spirit feels personally judged. Later, you help a young apprentice cut measuring rods from papyrus reeds. Each one must match the standard royal cubit, roughly 52, 3 centimeters. Give or take depending on your pharaoh's shoe size. You line up rod after rod. Everyone must match exactly. Why? Because if a single block ends up too short, the whole row collapses. Ancient construction doesn't mess around. Midday comes, and you eat lunch in the tool tent. Barley bread, lentils, a piece of dried fish with the texture of old sandal. Beck doesn't eat. He just sharpens a chisel while humming a tune that sounds vaguely threatening. Quirky discovery. They made their own glue using boiled animal hooves and tree resin. You ask if it smells bad. They hand you a pot. You nearly pass out. Glue here isn't so much adhesive as eldritch swamp in a jar. Afternoon brings you to the leveling teams. They use a tool called a leveling square, basically a wooden triangle with a vertical string, to measure if a block sits flat. A tiny shift can throw off the pyramid's symmetry. One worker adjusts a stone, waits for the string to settle, and then blows gently to align it perfectly. You swear he doesn't breathe like a normal human. There's a kind of reverence here. Nobody shouts. Nobody rushes. These are the quiet professionals, the whisperers of stone. You begin to understand why some Egyptians believed that the tools themselves had Kai's spiritual essence. It's hard to argue when a string and stick seem to bend geometry to their will. You sit under a shaded awning as Beck pulls out a half-finished tool chest. He lets you hold a bronze drill, not powered, not modern, just a bow drill with flint tips. It can bore through stone if you're patient, like incredibly patient. You try once. It spins, grinds, and makes the saddest hole you've ever seen. Still, it works. That's the point. Everything works not through magic, not through modern efficiency, but through repetition, ritual, and a kind of stubborn love for the process. These aren't just tools, they're extensions of the people who wield them. As dusk rolls in, the toolmakers clean their workstations. Every blade is hung, every string coiled. The forge cools with a sigh. Beck finally speaks. Tomorrow, he says, you try cutting stone. We see if you still like your fingers. You nod solemnly. You do like your fingers. A lot. You're still flexing your fingers like a nervous crab when the sun peeks over the horizon and you're told today's task involves the stars. Not metaphorically, literally. You follow a group of white-robed surveyors away from the noise and dust of the pyramid construction toward a quieter patch of packed earth marked with strange chalk lines and wooden pegs. There's a low hum here of breath, of focus, of men staring at the heavens while the rest of the world digs in the dirt. The leader introduces himself as Merka. He doesn't smile. He just hands you a string. points to a distant stake and says, "Hold, don't blink. You blink." Your job is to help measure alignment, which, it turns out, is not a small detail. It's the detail. If the pyramid's base isn't perfectly square, the whole thing will wobble like a failed wedding cake and probably collapse after the third dynasty or so. Not ideal. They start at night, using a simple tool called a merkit. It's 2 sticks and a string, but somehow they use it to track the circumpolar stars, those few brave lights that never set. The idea: find due north, then lay the pyramid's edges out at perfect 90-degree angles. No compass, no GPS, just the sky, some rope, and the quiet belief that geometry is watching. Mirka explains it calmly. We watch the star circle, then mark its lowest and highest points. Split the distance. That is north. You stare. He shrugs. It works. You hold the string taut while 2 men crouch beside the plumb bob, watching the shadow shift with the rising sun. A reed marker is placed. They nod. You move. They repeat. It's a dance one you don't fully understand but can feel in your bones. Here's a fringe fact. Some modern theorists believe the pyramid's alignment is too perfect, like aliens must have helped perfect. It's aligned to within 0.5 degrees of true north. That's straighter than most modern city blocks. Historians still argue about whether that's a result of thousands of careful measurements or just some incredibly lucky string work. You're leaning toward thousands of careful measurements, and also some divine-level stubbornness. As morning turns to late morning, the sun rises higher, and the markers multiply. Every angle, every length, every shadow is recorded on papyrus scrolls with neat hieroglyphic notes. You spot one scribe licking his reed pen to draw smoother lines. A little gross, a little charming. You try it. Your mouth now tastes like wet pond. Back at the pyramid site, the markings are transferred to stone. This part requires precision, patience, and apparently no help from you, because the layout crew politely but firmly hands you a jar of ink and tells you to just not spill it. You watch as Mirka and his team hammer bronze nails into the ground, then stretch knotted cords between them to form the final outlines. These cords are specially marked at cubit intervals, and each one must be exactly the right length, or someone's going to get yelled at. They measure, they re-measure, they stop for 5 minutes because someone thinks the sun angle is slightly off. They start again. And then something extraordinary happens. The grid appears. A perfect grid. Carved into the limestone base layer, it looks like a giant game board. Each square is a placeholder for a block. Each line, a whispered promise that this thing, this absurdly massive triangle, won't lean to the left. They step back, breathe, sip water. No one cheers. They just stare at it, exhausted and proud. You're handed a small chalkstone and invited to draw a line. You do. It's crooked. A child laughs. You've been demoted to holding the water jug. That evening, the stars come out early. No city lights, no noise, just the desert sky, blinking quietly. Mirka sits beside you and points out the Big Dipper, or what will become the Big Dipper. It's part of the alignment process. 2. You squint at the stars and realize how often ancient Egyptians must have looked up not just for stories or gods, but for answers. Quirky discovery of the day. They also tracked time using a shadow clock. Basically a flat stone with a vertical peg that casts shadows in specific arcs. You watch a scribe adjust one, mutter something about too much east, and then correct an entire row of lines based on a shadow that moved half an inch. It's simultaneously absurd and breathtaking. You lie back on a cool slab of stone, watching the last plumb lines get reeled in. The grid is finished. The stars still shine. The wind brushes across your face like an old lullaby, and even though your hands are dusty, your legs sore, and your chalk line objectively embarrassing, you helped mark the corners of eternity. You're expecting something dramatic when you finally get to step inside the pyramid. Trumpets, mystical chanting, maybe even a secret staircase that glows when you breathe on it. What you get instead is a low ceiling, a narrow hallway, and the immediate realization that ancient Egyptians were a lot shorter or didn't mind permanent neck pain. You duck into the entrance, which isn't at ground level but a little up the northern face. It's nothing flashy, just a dark opening carved into smooth limestone. You shuffle forward, bent at the waist, torch in hand, breathing damp air that smells faintly of old minerals and someone else's bad decisions. This is the descending passage, and it's steep. The floor slopes downward at about a 26-degree angle, just enough to make your thighs scream, but not enough to allow for any fun sliding. You're warned not to trip. You immediately trip. The walls are rough limestone, unadorned, bare. You thought there'd be paintings, carvings, maybe a golden frog playing a harp. Nope, just tight stone, echoing silence, and the distant dripping of what may or may not be your own sweat. After crawling deeper, you reach the grand gallery, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. Suddenly, everything opens up. The ceiling vaults upward like the inside of a cathedral, designed by someone who really liked triangles. It stretches nearly 30 feet high, and the smooth walls make your torchlight ripple like you're walking through the inside of a rib cage. You whisper something just to hear the echo. It comes back weird, off, like it got edited on the way back. The acoustics in here are famously odd. Some say they were designed that way, to amplify prayers or complaints. You try not to think about it. Historians still argue what this gallery was for. Some say it was just a corridor to the king's chamber. Others think it had ceremonial purposes. One fringe theory suggests it functioned as a giant sound funnel, possibly to awaken spiritual resonance. You suspect it mostly served to make tourists 30 centuries later say, "Wow." You press on and enter the king's chamber. Finally, it's a big, boxy room made of red granite hauled from Aswan. Just the effort to get those blocks here makes your knees cry. The room holds a single object, a massive granite sarcophagus. No inscriptions, no treasure, no pharaoh. Even just a big empty stone box that someone forgot to lock. You lean on it. It's colder than you expect, heavy with history. And despite everything, no gold, no secret passage, no alien charging station, it still feels powerful. Like the room remembers who it was built for, even if nobody else does. You run your hand along the wall. It's absurdly flat. Too flat, you ask your guide, a mason named Senmut, how they did it. He says, with patience and copper. You ask again. He says, lots of patience. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. This chamber has relieving chambers above it, not toilets. Thankfully, but stacked granite spaces designed to absorb and redistribute weight so the room doesn't collapse. One of them even has red graffiti from the workers, basically. Ancient construction notes and inside jokes. You picture a guy scrawling "Khufu was here" and chuckle. You explore the queen's chamber next. Smaller, lower ceiling, also empty. No queens inside. Oddly enough, its real purpose is a mystery. Some say it was symbolic. Some think it was used during specific rites. Others think it was a decoy to fool tomb robbers. You're beginning to suspect that half of pyramid design was just high-stakes misdirection. A guide hands you a clay model of the internal layout. It's more confusing than helpful. Shafts go nowhere. Passages stop abruptly. One tunnel rises but dead ends. Another goes downward into what looks like nowhere. You ask about those shafts. Air vents. Someone offers stairways for the soul. Another says no one agrees. You lean into one and hear a low whooshing sound. You back away, unnerved. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's Khufu whispering, "Don't touch my stuff." The bottom chamber, often called the unfinished chamber, is little more than a rough pit beneath everything else. You climb down a claustrophobic shaft to reach it, and it feels like entering the world's saddest basement. No carvings, no artifacts, just chipped rock and a sense that someone said, we'll finish it later, and then didn't. Quirky find of the day. Some believe this lower chamber was where rituals for the afterlife began deep in the earth, before the soul could rise through the galleries to the heavens. Others believe it was just the original plan before builders changed their minds halfway through. Maybe even the world's earliest architectural pivot. You rest on a stone bench near the exit tunnel. It's dark. Still, the pyramid doesn't hum. It holds weight, time, sweat. You close your eyes and try to imagine the day it was finished. The workers cheering, the priests chanting, the pharaoh not showing up because, well, he was already very dead. And as your torch flickers low, you realize something. The pyramid isn't alive, but it feels like it remembers everything. You crawl out of the pyramid with sore knees, a permanently hunched back, and the growing suspicion that the ancient Egyptians were part human, part tape measure. But there's no time to rest because now you're heading back into the sun, clipboard in hand, well, a wax board with a reed stylus, to follow the true power players of the pyramid project. The scribes, not the priests, not the engineers, not even the foremen yelling at rope teams all day. The scribes, the men who knew how to write, calculate, and catalog every grain of sand this operation consumed. You meet one named Hori. He's young, smells vaguely of ink and onions, and has the sharp, twitchy energy of someone who knows exactly how many bread loaves you're supposed to receive and will ruin your week if that number is off. He starts your day with a lecture. Everything must be recorded. Weight, width, length, worker attendance, tool loss, injuries, stone type, stone temperature. You blink. Stone temperature. He shrugs. We make up a few numbers to sound smart. You follow him across the site, ducking ropes and dodging sleds. Every few feet, he stops to scribble notes onto a wooden tablet covered in beeswax. The stylus makes tiny squeaks as it scratches. It's oddly satisfying. At the northern ramp, he checks the log. Block 12, 532, limestone. Width, 4 cubits and 1 finger. Assigned to Team Sechem. He licks the stylus before continuing, which you find both disgusting and apparently effective. Ink and spit go hand in hand here. Quirky fact. Some scribes flavor their ink water with fig juice to make it smell nicer. Others just accepted that writing with soot and fish glue meant always having mildly haunted hands. You visit the measuring tent, less tent, more tarp flapping against the sun. Inside are rods, ropes, and measuring cords treated like sacred relics. One cord has knots tied at precise cubit intervals. Another has feathers attached, which Hori says helps with airflow. You're 85% sure that's a joke. Historians still argue whether Egyptians had a formal grid system for planning the pyramid layout, or if it was more intuitive, like a massive game of spatial Jenga. Judging by Hori's color-coded wax board and alarming speed with fractions, you lean toward the giant invisible spreadsheet theory. Later, you watch him check a block's placement. 2 workers nudge it with wooden levers. Hori kneels, holds a reed against the corner, then shakes his head, off by half a finger. They groan. He writes it down. Recorded. You ask what happens if a block is wrong. Depends, he says. If it's small, we chip it. If it's big, we blame another team. Midday heat kicks in. Everyone moves slower. Hori doesn't. He flips his stylus, jots down rations received, beer consumed, and even how many fish a crew leader supposedly caught last night. I keep score, he says. Gods love details. You stop by the stone marker station where blocks are etched before hauling. Tiny symbols, part shipping label, part cosmic tag. They tell you where the block belongs, who worked on it, and sometimes include prayers or jokes. You see one that reads, "Lift with your knees, not your K." You laugh. No one else does. Later, you help prepare surveying ink. It's a grim cocktail of soot, gum, and water, stirred with a bone spoon. You sneeze while pouring and accidentally stain your tunic. Hori laughs for the first time. He shows you how they mark long, straight lines. They stretch rope soaked in pigment across a block's surface, snap it like a chalk line, and pop a perfect inky stripe. You try it. Your line looks like a bird had a seizure. Hori pats your back. Maybe you're better at lifting things. By sunset, the daily ledgers are compiled. Each team's output, each injury, each missing tool logged and archived. Sometimes on wax, sometimes scratched into limestone flakes called ostroxa. Hori stores them in a clay pot labeled urgent. You look inside. It's mostly snack requests and complaints about sandals. Quirky moment of the day. You find a scribe practicing his hieroglyphs on a spare block. He's carved a full cat, a duck, and a man holding a stick. None of them mean anything. He just likes the look. You nod in appreciation. Art for art's sake. Before dinner, you sit with Hori beneath a reed canopy as he files the last of his notes. Without writing, he says softly, "None of this survives. Not even the pyramid. But not the words." You ask what happens to all these records. Some go to the temple, some to the foreman, some to the gods, and some